Hello there. Welcome to your program, Security Reports, where we get you informed, enlightened, educated, and most importantly, updated on security issues as they unfold. I remain yours and only, Ernest Enuneku. Well, you may be surprised where we are. We're actually in South Africa, Pretoria, the capital city of South Africa to be precise. And we actually came here to do a lot of things which we will be unfolding to you as the program progresses. Now, I won't be doing this alone. I have a guest, a co-anchor here today from South Africa, actually our coordinator here in South Africa. I'll be bringing her to you just after this break. Yeah, welcome back to your program, Security Reports. Like I told you earlier, I have a beautiful lady by my side, and I would love her to actually introduce herself to you.
Thank you, Ernest. My name is Ruth Denton, and we are here in Pretoria, South Africa, giving you a security report on the issue that we have on ground.
Now, the Nigerian Army actually did set up a committee to look at the allegations against some members of the Nigerian Army, some allegations of election malpractices. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukusu Buratai, did set up a committee to investigate into this matter and bring a logical conclusion to it. Let's get to that report now. The role of the Nigerian Army in the successful conduct of the 2019 general election cannot be overemphasized, as it worked closely with the Nigerian Police Force and other sister agencies to ensure Nigerians exercise their franchise without any fear or intimidation by desperate politicians. The Nigerian Army, however, have been accused of some misconduct during the election, and this, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukusu Buratai, has vowed that the Nigerian Army will investigate and punish any officer or soldier found to have committed any form of professional misconduct before, during, or after the elections. In line with this desire, the Chief of Army Staff have set up a special committee to investigate allegations and submit its report not later than 31st of March 2019. This committee, which will be chaired by Major General T.A. Gagariga, has Brigadier General J.M. Ali, Brigadier General G.O. Adeshino, and Brigadier General M.A. Obari. Others are Colonel A.T. Biti Young, Colonel A. Tanko, Colonel W.A. Bakari as members, and Lieutenant Colonel P.A.J. Ebuk to serve as secretary. The committee was inaugurated by the Chief of Administration, Nigerian Army, Major General K.A.Y. Ishiaku, on behalf of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukusu Buratai. The Army Chief advised the committee to carry out their duties objectively, fairly, and transparently in line with its term of reference.
We've had a lot of allegations against the Nigerian Army on the issue of abuses, particularly on issues of election and preventing or allegations of also assisting in some way by political governments. In this wise, it became very necessary for the Chief of Army Staff to integrate you so that at least you investigate all allegations. He has a lot of confidence on you, and you are selected from the cream of all the officers that we have, knowing fully well that you are going to deliver and do the best you can for the system. I urge you that you should do your best. You should go down and leave no stone unturned. Ensure that you visit all the states that the allegations are leveled against the personnel of the Nigerian Army, so that we unravel and bring up all solutions that will at least prevent future occurrences in the Nigerian Army. You've had the terms of reference, and I believe that it's not exhaustive, but that is may crop up as you do your investigation to find out all the allegations that is leveled against the Army. Please make a detailed work so that this will serve as a point of reference for future generations of Nigerian Army. When you proceed, we'll make all necessary arrangements for you to use your work, and also as much as possible liaise with all the formations and units that are involved or others, things happen in their real world. So I wish you well, and on behalf of the Chief of Army Staff, I, Major General K.A.Y. Isiaku, the Chief of Administration, hereby inaugurates the committee on the allegation leveled against Nigerian Army personnel during the conduct of general election and invariably the operational self-conduct. I wish you well, and the board is hereby inaugurated.
The committee is further mandated to visit all states where issues have been raised about the conduct of the Nigerian Army during and after the elections, and also interact with civil society organizations, sister security agencies, and state governors with claims against the Army. It would be recalled that Lieutenant General Tukusu Buratai has on many occasions warned that Nigerian Army personnel must remain apolitical, respect human rights, and abide by the rule of law in all its official engagements within or outside Nigeria and in or out of conflict situations. Ernest Enuneku, Abuja.
Welcome back to your program, Security Report. It's very obvious the Army is actually set to unravel the mystery behind whatever it is that happened during the election. The Chief of Army Staff is very clear about it. The Army will deal decisively with any officer or soldier that went outside the professional conduct of that elections. Now, Ruth.
Yes, sir.
Over to you.
Well, thank you so much for still staying tuned with us. And an interview was held here in Victoria with Professor, did I say Professor? Dr. Rian Rickett, with the CEO of Security Watch Africa. And he talked extensively about security in the whole of Africa and also in Africa. And he made some points that I actually noted. He said the people in power refuse to leave the power for, the word is so tricky. I actually made the note of it, and I think it is very important that the people in power should allow those outside power to come into power so that everything can coexist and we can have a good and better Africa.
Now, the fact remains that the South Africa as a country will be having an election come the month of May. That is why this interview was very important.
And I actually made a note talking about the election that is coming up in South Africa, which is the general election that will be held in South Africa on the 8th of May 2019 here in South Africa.
All right, let's get to that interview now, where Dr. Rickett actually spoke on a number of things and actually helped us he opened our eyes to a lot of issues in policing, comparing Nigerian policing and that of South Africa. Now, in Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Police Force, while in South Africa here, we have the South African Police Service. Now, he actually broke down these things into pieces for us to actually have more knowledge on them.
Patrick, yes, very good to see you back in South Africa.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a very sunny day, really, and very soon you'll get into your winter season.
Yes, we'll experience the cold, but we'll be happy with the warmth while we have it.
Yeah, that's nice. And incidentally, we are in this territory where you help sway as a police officer. But before we go into the detail of you having been a policeman for some time, let's get to meet you. Who really are you?
Well, my name is Rian Rickert. I'm a lecturer at the Tshwane University of Technology. Before I became a lecturer, I was a police official. I am 53 years old, happily married with 2 children, and that's about as much as I can tell you at this point in time.
Yep. But I know you've been lecturing for 18 years now.
Yeah, I'm in my 18th year, yes.
18th year. And you were a police officer for 17 years?
For 17 years, yes.
Oh, so that means for 35 years you've been in service.
I've been a policeman, and I'll most probably die a policeman. I think it's too late to get out of it now.
Now, how easy was it for you to transmit from being a police officer to becoming an academia, a lecturer?
Patrick, yes. Being so many years in the police service, you obviously have gained a vast amount of experience. And also you got to the point where you could see things for what they are. You could see things going wrong and going correct. And also, fortunately, throughout my career, I invested time and money in studying so I studied the academic part of it as well. So I had to do this balance, and there was a bit of a contradiction between what I had to do operationally and what I was taught theoretically. And I thought that at one stage, for me to grow as a person and for me to contribute to the country, I could do so much better outside the police service than inside the service itself. For the simple reason, I'm of the firm opinion that you've got to invest in the future, and that means in the next generations. So how do I carry over that experience that I've gained in the police service, plus the academic knowledge that I've acquired? How do I marry the two? And the academic environment at the university proved to be the most comfortable option available for me at that point in time. And I never regretted one day. I'm very glad where I am. I'm very happy where I am, and I feel I can make a contribution towards my beloved police service, but also to the generations that is to follow.
Okay, now let's talk about what you are doing. What are you lecturing? What are you teaching this younger generation?
I'm a bit of a jack of all trades at the university itself, but my main subject is policing and criminology, but mainly policing. To ask me specifically what I teach them is a bit difficult, but I'm very much focused on principles. If you know what is right from wrong, and you attempt to do what is right, then things will go. You won't always succeed, obviously, you're going to make mistakes, but I'm all about principles. Teach the young ones what is the principle of honesty, the principles of ethics, the principle of your occupation, the principles of what you're supposed to do. Once they have that innate knowledge, then one can start with the finer detail and the operational do's and don'ts. And those operational do's and don'ts are usually given to them during basic training, but the principles somehow go lost. So I appreciate the youngsters in my classroom where I can not teach them just the principles, but actually how they fit into the greater context and the greater scheme of things.
Okay, we are here in Pretoria. By the way, I understand the name is to be changed. Right?
Yes.
And maybe that is where you are trying the University of Technology, where you're also.
That's
lecturing.
correct.
All right. Okay, good. But you were once a commander. You were once a station commander.
That's
in
correct.
this territory, in this area. How was it then?
Well, I must say I was a station commissioner from 1997, which means after the 1994 elections, until just after 2000. I think I left in June 2001 or 2000, I can't recall exactly. Then was a difficult era. It was just after the elections. People were still in a bit of euphoria. Had lots of expectations about the new government going to rectify the mistakes of the past. And there was an air of expectation. Crime, unfortunately, was also rampant because the criminal element usually are opportunistic in nature. And through people's euphoria, they saw their chances to commit crime. And also, our borders were a bit porous at that stage. It still is a bit. And a lot of people that never belonged here came here as well with criminal intentions. So it was a difficult time. It was also a very illuminating time for me to see from a pre-apartheid police official. I joined the police service in 1985. Up until 2000, how the changes took place, not just in terms of the country, but the attitude of the police officials, and how the organization changed and adapted and grew to accommodate the new democratic dispensation. That was for me very nice. Unfortunately, there were also some negatives, I would say, that some people wanted to change too fast, and some people didn't want to change at all. And I found myself sometimes in the middle of balancing these characters, especially those working under my command. Those who wanted to change immediately, everything overnight, versus those who wanted to keep things slow and still the same. It was a bit of a balancing act, but I came through it quite well.
Okay, it's interesting talking with you. Haven't been involved in policing in pre-apartheid
Yes.
and post-apartheid period. But I know that in your career, you had faced some life-threatening situations
Yes.
in policing. Is it that difficult or dangerous?
Yes, remember, nobody becomes a police official because it's a safe occupation. Everybody that joins the police service, even from day one, knows through the media and through the history itself that this is a dangerous occupation. So you enter a dangerous environment. You don't always work with dangerous people, but you get into situations which is not always under your control and which you are not responsible for. And sometimes you work with individuals who might not have your best interest or the best interest of anybody else at heart except their own. And some of them might be violent. And remember, you are interfering with their job, and their job is to steal and to murder and whatever the case may be, and they use firearms and weapons in the process. So their tools of the trade are dangerous. The persons that you deal with are often dangerous. But we must not forget that the policeman does not just work with the criminal. He works with the victims as well, with the general society. So it's again a balance issue. I would say that the dangerous element is unfortunately proportionately it's less than the non-dangerous one, but the impact is so much more. And it is dangerous, yes.
Here in South Africa, you have the South African Police Service. In some other countries, you have police force. Really, what difference does it really make?
Patrick, fundamentally no difference in terms of the mandate and the job of the police specifically. But I think in the mindset of government and the mindset of the people, the recipients of the service, the services that you deliver, it's nice to hear that you're getting it from a service-orientated organization rather than a force-orientated organization. So I think it's semantics, it's words, but it has an impact on the attitude of the hearer. It has an impact on, I think, on the people inside the police service. If you say, I work for a service, I think there's a small mental switch opposite to those, I work for a force. So I think it's more psychology. But in essence, the work remains the same. You've got the mandate from the law, you've got to apply the law, law enforcement's got certain rules and regulations that you've got to follow, but I think it's a question of attitude. So the police service name might have an attitude connotation to it.
Some people have said that the police of old, maybe of the time when you were practically involved in policing and to the police, that there is some difference. Some might say maybe the issue that some police officers today do not have the passion as
Yes.
people of then.
It is unfortunately so. Every generation criticizes the next or the previous generation, but I would like to say that, in my opinion, if I look at the caliber of police officials that is recruited these days, the criteria for me is not exactly the same as of old. In the older days, I would say there was a passion. It was not about the money. There is no money in policing, really. It was not about the career path. It was to serve the people. And you knew that your life was going to be in danger at certain occasions, yet you did not mind. And I think today's generation are not that inclined. They occupational health and safety and all those issues are there. But that occupational health and safety and legislation cannot cater for all situations. And I think, in my opinion, and I'm generalizing, I know there are brilliant police officials out there. I think there was a bit more of a soldier mentality, push-through mentality from the older generation, and I think the junior generation is slightly softer in that regard, slightly more aware of rights and those type of things. And I'm not saying rights did not exist when we were police officials, but there's a small nuanced difference, in my opinion. In terms of, if I was to go into a dangerous situation with an older type policeman of the previous generation, I'll feel more comfortable.
Now, most society or countries outside feels that the people feel that the government do not look after the policemen and the police service very well as much as they should. How is it in South Africa?
I think the argument that government does not always look after the police service is not always a valid one, because no government on earth can actually function effectively without having the police service on their side. If a government has the police service, or the military for that matter, as an opposition, they will be far, far less effective. So I think it is more a historical attitude of police officials that they feel the government doesn't always look after them, based mainly, I would suggest, on salaries that they receive, because every policeman on the planet moans and groans about their salaries. And I also sometimes think that they are not given the support that they need politically. If things go wrong, it's easy to sacrifice one of the police officials in the name of bigger things. And I sometimes also think that many police services around the world are under-resourced, especially when it comes to the safety of the official and technology investment. And I think some of the police organizations and or officials might use those arguments to say that the police are not, or the government is not always looking after the police as they should. But I want to reiterate my first statement. No government can function if the police is its opposition. So I think most of the community would argue counterwise. They would say that the police are adequately resourced, are adequately, for instance, vehicles, but it's just abused. So there are two arguments, two sides of the coin here.
Now, before we come to the issue about policing the election. The election is around the corner here in South Africa. Let's look at the community, because the police officer or the police official police the community. How much does the community get involved in their policing?
In South Africa, we've got obviously your traditional community policing as a principle and as a philosophy that has been practiced by the organization for many, many years. But my personal and academic opinion is that community policing is nice terminologies to have, but in practice it doesn't always work for a variety of reasons, not the fault of the community or the police service. Community policing demands certain dynamics to be in place. First of all, an informed community. Secondly, a caring community. An involved community, not just involved in policing, but involved in all aspects of social life. The health, the schooling, the education system. And I think in South Africa we've got a very marginalized and fragmented society. If you go to a specific neighborhood, it's not homogeneous anymore. It's heterogeneous in nature, which means people live for themselves, they look after their only daily survival. And if they don't need to involve the police in anything, then they don't. So the police for them is a bit of a standby, an emergency element. If I'm in need, I need to phone a number quickly and I want response immediately. But otherwise, I don't want to see the police. So in that context, there is no real seriousness and essence in community policing in South Africa, but mainly due to the fragmented nature of neighborhoods. I do see that somewhere in the rural communities, where people are by nature closer together, they tend to be more closer to the police, and community policing there are more in principle applied correctly. But otherwise, there are structures. We've got community police forums where the police in the community have platforms to engage, platforms to consult. But the community cannot really hold the police responsible for anything specifically except through the courts. So I think community policing and the structures in South Africa doesn't have real teeth to have a definitive impact.
Now, still retrospective. I want to find out from you. You've been out of the police service for quite some time now.
Yes.
And looking back, would you say there were some actions you took while you were in the service that now you would have done it a little bit better or different, or you would have just left it like that?
I would have done almost everything different. But not so much in actions, but I think in maturity. Okay. And I think in insight. Now, unfortunately, experience is something that cannot be bought. I wish we can experience and put it on a shelf for people to buy, but unfortunately we can't. So I think from a maturity perspective, I would have done things differently. I would have acted less hastily. But certain of the incidents you had to act in only one way, mature or not mature. If somebody shoots at you or you have to arrest somebody, maturity has got no role to play there. But I think in dealing with victims of crime, I think I would have been more sympathetic, less generic, less artificial. I also think in terms of investigation of crime, I would have thought wider, thought more out of the box. And I also think that in terms of my studies, I would have tried to study psychology a little bit more. There's a human being on the other side. Whether it's a suspect, a criminal, a victim, a affected person, it's a human being. And I think some of us don't always, well, I certainly didn't as much as now. And I think if I could go back and maybe change that aspect of my policing, that is something I would have done.
Yeah, talking about that aspect of your policing. I was driving with you along Pretoria West, the area where it's one of those flashpoints where
Yes.
a lot of criminal activities took place, and you were a bit nostalgia about how
Yes.
you seem to be popular then because everybody seems to still remember you.
Yes.
Now, some of those actions you took was to sanitize the society, was to make it much better. Do you think that those actions had helped to making the place a little bit better?
I would have hoped so. I would have hoped that the energy and the effort that I put on was not in vain. And even I've left Pretoria West 16, 17 years ago. And still people remember you and still they wave. And that means you must have had a good impact. I think some of the impact I had was on prospective criminals, trying to turn them away from crime. And I think that has helped a little bit in some of the legacies that you've left behind, because if you can turn one person, you've turned his family and his people, his children, you've turned. And it's not always possible. But I would have liked to think that the effort and energy that is put in sometime must have some return on investment. So I would still like to think that there are some people out there that remember good deeds I've done. And I think I'm a very, very firm believer. Everybody in life deserves a second chance. Everybody. And I think many people that I should have taken through this system, which I didn't, that repaid me by becoming good citizens. And I think it might not always be legal, but those are the discretionary decisions you have to make. And I would like to think that everybody deserves a second chance. There's not just bad in people. There must be good, and I think policemen must start looking, where's the good in people, and work on rather on that than just on the assumption that everybody's bad, everybody's against them, anybody is a threat, everybody's an enemy, everybody is a liar. So there's a bit of cynicism that I think that sometimes creeps in, and I would like to see that part of what I as a personality have is positivism. I'm very positive about most things. And I think if most people, policemen specifically, can replace the cynicism they have with positivism, their actions would follow suit.
But maybe it's not the fault of the policeman, because in the basic police training, most times you are taught to suspect everybody.
Yes, yes. Basic training, I think, worldwide is a conundrum for the police, because you have to train a police. Take note, there's a difference between educating and training. You've got to train a person to do a specific job. In my doctoral studies that I'm currently busy with, I'm trying very hard to change the professional ethos or professional perception of the police. I think police officials should have a qualification in law or psychology even before they go for basic training. Give them some theoretical experience, give them some life experience, because they've got to make life and death decisions, and the reference framework is not always there. So I'm hoping to change that as well. But the attitude of a person you cannot educate into or train into a person. Unfortunately not.
Right, unfortunately. Now in May this year, 2019, there will be an election in
Yes.
Southern Africa.
Yes.
In some countries, some police play roles in making sure that the election is smooth, safe, and violence-free.
That's correct.
What are the roles of the South African Police Service in election?
Well, if one looks at the fundamental role of every police service in the world, it's supposed to be preserving the peace. That is the fundamental job of all policemen. Everybody says it's investigation of crime, law enforcement. It's not. The primary function of all police officials in the world should be preserving the peace. During election time, emotions runs high. That is a case, and one should always remember that there are always elements among society who would like to disrupt the elections for their own agenda and for their own personal and or political reasons. So the general peace of society, which should be at the heart of what the policemen do, is threatened in a way by these heightened activities with people with different agendas. Having said that, crime prevention then, or preventing things from getting out of hand, then surfaces. Now, crime prevention in terms of elections can take place at three levels: a tertiary level, a secondary level, and obviously a primary level. At tertiary level, the role of the police is almost like national intelligence, to identify those structures and elements that would like to disrupt the election from at the national level, at the fundamental and at the national level. And behind the scenes, the police, in terms of their national intelligence, in preserving the peace for the entire country, has got a very big role to play there. But those are mostly behind the scenes. Those are not visible. Those are things that happen with the Office and Crime Intelligence and Technology. On a secondary crime prevention level, the police must be visible at your stations and your election stations. The police are but a role player in these environments. You have got your central role players, the officials that work there, with your different political parties that work there. There is one central person in charge, and you have your persons that vote. Those are the two central role players. The police is a external role player that see that the things that happen at this polling station must be done within a social order and a sense of sensibility. If any one of these role players, being aware that the police are in the vicinity, either a voter or one of the elected or one of the officials that officiate, needs the service of the police for whatever reason, for whatever incident happened, they must then call upon the police to render that service. So it's a called upon service. It is requested. That is your secondary crime prevention or secondary services that delivers. Also for the peace of mind of the people going there. If they see the police officials in just their visibility, they will feel better. So your voter is also placed at in a situation of confidence. On a primary crime prevention level, it's actually not crime prevention, on a primary level where the police get involved, on these previous ones I've just said, on the request level, nothing really happens. But on a primary level, there might be an incident that deserves investigation. A specific crime or whatever the case may be. A docket, a dossier is opened. A police case docket is registered, a case number allocated. Then obviously it's expected of the police in an objective manner to investigate the case as the first step in the criminal justice system and then hand over to the justice system for that to proceed. So the police has got various roles to play, remote and very intimate both, but in general they must stay on the external perimeter and create an atmosphere that is conducive for the elections to take place in.
I'm sure that you have policed so many elections before you have this
Yes.
service. Have there been a time where they were violent and police had to come in?
Yes, you will find in any election in the world, I think, you will find people that do not see eye to eye for some reason, disputes, and people. And like I said, election times is emotional. It's very emotional, and people are very fundamental in their beliefs. And if a person next to me doesn't believe the same way, I would like to convince him. Even if I'm in a queue to vote, I would still like to canvass for my principle. And other people don't appreciate it. So many of the interpersonal violence that takes place are a question of emotions and conflict that happens on the spur of the moment. It's very intimate. But then obviously, like I've mentioned before, you've got certain disruptive elements, almost like gangs, a group of people who would like to disrupt, and they tend to be more violent because they are much organized. These other ones I've just mentioned are on the spur of the moment. A person don't go to the voting station with a club in the hand. He goes there with a pen, hopefully, and a good attitude. But these persons who like to disrupt, they organize very well, and they rely on intimidation. And I cannot intimidate you with just a finger. I need to have something in the hand. So those are the type of violence that occurs sometimes at voting stations. Then it's also regional, depending on where a certain political party is stronger than others, and it also it also relies on what the political parties tell their people. We are losing this fight, and we've got to do something radical. Now, I'm not saying that's, and I'm not pinpointing, but those are the realities those are the things that happen, and the police must stay remote from this, move on the outside perimeter, be objective at all times, but handle the incidents as they occur. You do always get in certain voting stations or voting areas who are prone to violence. The history speaks for themselves. And I think those are identified obviously well beforehand, and police presence, and sometimes even the army in a very supporting role.
Yeah, because I was going to come to that. I said, if the armed forces of South Africa, do they support, do they play any role in election?
The armed forces by default, excluding the police, you have several other institutions, the military being the biggest one of them all. The military will very seldom get involved. If your military has a predominant presence during a voting period, then the government says we are not in control. We have to, if you have to make war, because military is considered as an element of war. If I have to utilize a war machine to establish and maintain sanity and preserving the peace, then there are something fundamentally wrong. But many countries might not have enough police officials to police all the voting stations, because in a democracy you're trying to go to where the people are, and sometimes the voting stations are extremely remote, and you simply do not have enough police resources to cover all those bases. And then the military will be used as a secondary role player to boost numbers and boost infrastructure and capacity, but in all cases under the auspices of the police service, because should something go wrong, as I've mentioned, a case docket has to be opened. It's not the military that will do so, it's the police that will do so. So the police and the military work very, very well together in South Africa, I would like to say. I'm not privy, or have known of an incident where the military and the police actually worked against each other in some way. But it's got to do with budget. Elections is expensive. And the budget will also dictate to what extent these other forces can be used. I want to say something in South Africa. Our private security services, which is very often overlooked, have an enormous role to play in preserving the peace as well. You'll have many of your bigger security companies. I don't know if they do it for free. I'm not aware of that. But they sometimes also, because many of these voting stations are in neighborhoods where this security company has got vested business interest, and sometimes they also deliver a very valuable, especially quick response service. So I would like to comment and say that it's an often overlooked element, the private security companies that deliver also a very, very worthwhile and noteworthy service in these regards.
Now, let's come to specific now. Nigeria, the largest, the biggest in terms of population in
Yes.
Africa, recently held its general elections, and the military were called in some instances for obvious reasons. There were some places where that were marked as red in terms of violence, and
Yes.
the military were patrolling and making sure that those who are out to cause trouble do not have come. Immediately they see the military present, they stay back because the police may not be able to face them.
Yes.
So some have said that the military in that instance came out because the police have actually failed. Not being, the confidence is not there, and that is
Yes.
why the military is now coming out physically to patrol.
Yes, in Nigeria you have a large number of militant groups that by default are anti-government, and they use the time of elections to heighten their profile and expose themselves as a fighter for whatever cause. And they use militant means, and they use military hardware. Like I mentioned earlier, these groups that come with sticks and stuff, but those guys don't come with sticks, they come with guns. And I also mentioned earlier that the history of certain places speaks for themselves. And I think where there were previous military type of interference or military type of violence, it will only make sense to use the people who are accordingly trained to handle these situations as the primary role player, and then the police as the secondary role player. I also know that Nigeria is a very vast country, and again many of these voting stations are very remote. Very, very remote. And if I was a soldier, if I was the militant element, I will actually use that remoteness and lack of resources to my advantage. And so I think that the military are in those cases much more prudently trained and adequately equipped to deal with those situations. There is a saying that we all know, fight fire with fire. And in that case, I would say that the government actually doesn't have a choice. So I don't think I blame the police for running away. I just think they realize from the outset we are outgunned, outnumbered, outtrained, and it would not make sense to put them as the first line of defense in those type of situations. Fortunately, in South Africa, we don't have that as yet. I don't think we have or should have. But remember when I said about primary, tertiary crime, where that national intelligence comes in. I think that again plays an enormous role in determining what resource to be deployed where and when. So I think those army deployment or defense force employments in Nigeria might be informed by national intelligence.
Oh, we could go on and on because it's quite exciting. But really, I must thank you because
Oh yes.
finding time to talk with us on these issues is very, very important. I know you are passionate about it.
About most things, yes.
I'm ready to give you time. I hope that we'll have to call on you again and talk more about these issues so that the general public, not only in South Africa or in Nigeria, everywhere will be more aware about what we are doing, what the people and the community desire. Now, finally, let's come to this point. I know that you are white in color.
I'm getting a 10 right now.
Because some people will say, how do you blend? How do you mix up a South African society that seems to be this the black and the white, but we've seen you associate with everybody. In fact, how do you come?
So I personally think it's inside everybody to, if you have personal dignity and personal self-respect, and it's true and honest, then you will exhibit this to anybody you meet, regardless of who they are. I mix with people. I actually refuse to see your color, and but it is a sensitive issue in South Africa, given our apartheid history and all that type of things. And unfortunately, and I'm saying this without fear or favor, I think our political masters would like to keep that alive sometimes for their own personal benefit and agendas. People, if you let them just be people, will get along just fine. But sometimes yes, you will always have individuals amongst all groups who just are not there. But I think the majority of people just want to live in peace, just want to get along, just want to go about their daily lives. And if you have respect for other people, you will allow that, and they will allow you. But I sometimes think those in power do not realize the messages that they give. They would like to instill this, I won't say hatred, but this acknowledgement of differences. For sometimes them it's a political pawn to use, and I think it's unfortunate. But as long as we, through these media, can tell people it really does not make a difference who you are. If I respect you, if I have dignity with you, and you return the favor, why can't we all get along? Then this place will, then Africa particularly will be a far, far, far better place to be.
You think Africa can actually get
I believe it.
solution to
I
this?
believe it. I believe it. I absolutely believe it. I'm a very religious person, first of all. And secondly, there are so many good people in Africa that's just not allowed to exhibit what they can offer. I think the big issue in Africa is unfortunately greed. Those in power, I made a previous statement, those in power stay in power by keeping those out of power out of power. And to keep people out of power is not having them getting the richness of the country. They keep it to themselves. I've said it also earlier, politics is good business, but keeping people poor is good politics. Because it keeps people dependent on you. And I wish that mindset can change. Because that's the root of people in power, their personal greed. And there's so much goodness in the masses. And I don't know how we're going to change that. But I believe we are going to turn that corner quickly. And with divine intervention, I hope it happens soon. And Africa can be the next frontier of the goodness of people. We can show the rest of the world how it's not how you fall, it's how you stand up. And I think Africa is about to stand up.
Now finally, Security Watch Africa is partnering with your institution to an university, particularly your department
Yes.
of policing, and to ensure that police officers all over Africa get educated and be well and more informed like you. Yeah, the other day we were driving past, and there was a police officer who identified you and they turned out to be one of your students.
Yes.
We're trying to be able to educate, to provide opportunity of serving police officers coming to learn under what you have.
Yes, we as a department, obviously in safety and security, we have a traffic qualification, a corrections qualification, and a policing qualification. And to prove just to get back to your point, one of my students pulled us off in the vehicle. He was doing traffic duty and immediately recognized me. And I think the fact that academia and operational police officials are getting to know each other on that level is a good thing, which means there's more dimensions than just to stop a vehicle. There's a personal connection as well. But because we are exposed to each other, and that's the problem we've got with community policing. People are not exposed to each other, and where they are exposed to each other, it's in a different way. To get to your point where we can expand this principle of exposure, academic exposure, to get people to see things in a different way, I think we've got an online platform where we're going and using technology. Because physical is not always possible, but we're using technology. I'm old school. I will tell you, I'm old school. I'm not very good with technology, but I think it's a very handy medium if done and applied correctly, that we can reach out this message and spread the word and educate police officials to a higher level. I'm not saying they're uneducated. I'm saying to the next level, because that's what Africa needs. This next level interpretation, this next level attitude, this next level application. And it starts only with one or two people to filter through. It's like an umbrella. You know, a small umbrella keeps a big sun away. And you've got to make shade for a lot of people. So let's get as many umbrellas up as we can to keep people out of harm's way and start changing attitudes. And I hope our university, our motto is we empower people. I hope our department specifically very dynamic. And I hope the technology and this new platform that we have can facilitate in that regard. I really hope so. I pray so.
So welcome back. We're still here on the Security Report, coming to you live from Pretoria, South Africa. And that was an exclusive interview with the lecturer there. And I'm sure you've gotten a lot of points from what he has compared the Nigerian police force and that of South Africa, and also how we can coexist as an Africa to bring back a better Africa that we all hope and pray for.
The truth remains that the interview was actually detailed, where a lot of issues,
Very, very detailed.
even concerning politicians,
Of course,
that
of course.
the trick concerning what they do to actually keep the masses down there.
Yeah, of course. And you know, he said something that I actually noted. I think I'm going to read that out to you. He said, those in power stays in power to keep those out of power out of power. That is so important.
Well, Africa must be liberated. Africa must be liberated.
Yes.
That is the truth. Now, still on the program, we are moving ahead now to the Stellenbosch University, where Security Report actually had an interview with the Dean of Military Science, talking about Professor Samuel Sheila.
Yes, Sheila.
Now, where he actually brokered a lot of things. Now, Security Watch Africa actually have this partnership,
of course,
with the Stellenbosch University.
Yes.
It was actually talked on, a number of issues were discussed.
A lot.
Now, let's get to that interview, and I know at the end of it, I'm sure you've learned one or two things.
South Africa is a part of Africa that has shown that military activities can be well articulated, well streamlined and institutionalized. And this is because the training program that is coordinated from where we are right now is headed by a man that, though not a military man, but is inculcating level of knowledge to both young, middle level and senior military personnel of not only South Africa but the entire Southern Africa. I'm talking about Professor Samuel Sheila, who is the Dean, Faculty of Military Sciences of Stellenbosch University. I wouldn't be able to tell you about this man or the school or the faculty because it's quite massive. I want him to maybe in brief tell us what the faculty does and what he's doing in the faculty. Prof, it's a pleasure to talk with you. We know that you're very busy, but we just want to have this chat with you because as we discuss later, we'll get to find out why the faculty and Stellenbosch is reaching out to the rest of Africa. But what is your work? What does your work entail, and what do you do here?
Thank you very much, sir. Like you pointed out, my name is Professor Sam Tshehla. My work, I'm the current 17 of the Faculty of Military Science, which is part of Stellenbosch University. My student body is actually students in uniform from the South African National Defence Force. I still teach students from the first year, second year, third year. At the end of the third year, they complete with a Bachelor of Military Science degree. And of course, going back slightly, Faculty of Military Science is one of the 10 faculties within the University of Stellenbosch. All our degree programs are issued through the University of Stellenbosch. And then, of course, we got a contract between the Department of Defense and the University of Stellenbosch. In that case, that's when I get all my students from the South African National Defence Force. My students range from young junior officers, and we also teach at the postgraduate level the senior officers of the South African National Defence Force. My academic programs also include the honors program, the master's programs, as well as a PhD in military science. And obviously, we have been in existence for the past 67 years. And in April, we will be doing 68 years as a military science.
Wow, that's quite massive. 68 years, that's a long time. So you have this kind of faculty and turned out very, very senior military officers who had seen it all. From our understanding, this faculty also have spearheaded when you talked about issues of the war sciences and all that, but let's not talk much about that. But let's come to you also desire to impart some level of leadership knowledge and good governance to other, not only South Africa, to other parts of, like you always call, brothers of Africa.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what is it about?
All right, I think we, as the University of Stellenbosch, we also aspire to make an impact in terms of research that we do within the broader university structure, in which, of course, military science is one of the university entity in which our focus is heavily on the issues relating to military activities. Now, number one, what we can highlight in terms of the junior officers level, we try to impart them with the knowledge that they are going to utilize as senior officers in the Defense Force. With that, we also look at as to what is the need for Africa as a whole. And of course, we know the challenges in Africa is the whole aspect of leadership. Good governance is one of the biggest challenges we have in Africa. And also the issue of looking at aspects of what is happening at sea. Much as we are surrounded by the sea itself, sometimes we often lack in terms of knowledge as to what do we do with the sea. Now, within the SADC region, we also trained some students from the neighboring countries. We trained students from Mozambique Defense Force. We trained some students from Botswana Defense Force. And that training is mainly on a higher education level, on a degree level. In Mozambique, typically, we got about 3 students there that already completed the degrees within military science. Now, our plan is to expand that knowledge base that we have as military science to the rest of Africa, including now reaching out to our brothers and sisters in Nigeria. And that is very key for us to remain relevant within the knowledge base that we possess as military science. And I think that's what is very key, and that's what is driving the faculty as a whole in terms of research and development.
Okay, okay, still building on that, we understand there's an MOU working relationship between the faculty, the university, and Security Watch Africa. What is this about, and what is it to achieve?
The fundamental base, as we are in the academic fraternity, I pointed out a couple of times that we are in the business of knowledge production. The plan with Security Watch Africa is to develop short courses that is going to empower officers in all entire security cluster as a whole. And those short courses will be geared to focus on leadership, the whole aspect of governance, the whole aspect of defense forces as a whole, and the strategy to run the defense forces. And I think those are the kind of, or to run the whole armed forces. If we can be in a position with the little that we know and we understand, we can be in a position to reach out to the entire Africa. That will be for the benefit of the Africans. Now, as many scholars will speak, in most cases they speak about African solution for the Africans. We can be in a position to narrate our position better than anybody else coming from elsewhere.
And not from the CNN version of Africa.
Definitely, my brother, we don't really need a CNN version of Africa. We just need to really tell the story as it unfolds on the ground. And basically with the Security Africa, Security Watch Africa, we are really looking forward to be in a position to work effectively as a collective, especially as military science, to be in a position to impart our knowledge to the rest of Africa. And hopefully we'll be in a position to reach the entire Africa with regards to this program.
I'm sure you've learned a lot concerning what should be done in Africa.
Yeah, of course, because the problem of Africa, like I said earlier, the solution rather of Africa remains here with us. We cannot bring somebody from the outside to come solve the problem of Africa for us. We, the Africans, should be incubed,
Yes.
empowered, and also have intellectual knowledge about the solution that we have to bring to the table of Africa.
And we must also state clearly here that the partnership between Security Watch Africa and the the Stellenbosch University, is actually aimed at building the military capacity in Nigeria and also in West Africa.
Yes.
And the other partnership between Sector West Africa and the Tshwane University of Technology is also aimed at boosting the manpower capacity in policing and traffic management.
Yes.
And we believe when this partnership will actually help in ensuring that Africa is safer.
Yes, of course, and you also agree with me that these two partnerships are very, very key to bringing a better security services in Africa in whole.
Now, like we mentioned earlier, Africans are the only ones that can solve the problem of Africa.
Okay.
We must see that there is a problem and we must solve it as Africans,
Yes.
not looking outside.
Yes.
All right, that's all we can take for this week. And I hope you still remember we are in South Africa.
Yeah, Pretoria precisely.
To be precise. Well, I remain yours and only Ernest Enuneku.
And I'm Ruth Denton. And before I go, I'd like to leave this with you. I'd like you to please be conscious of your environment at all times, because security is a key to a longer life. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.